Okay, here we go. So, God willing, the plan is that we finish Tanya this week on the 53 chapters. Shavuot is going to be next weekend, but after Shavuot, we're God willing going to continue on to the next section of Tanya, which is known as the Shar HaYichud Ve'amuna, which are the gates or the gate of the oneness and trust in God. It's a very fundamental section of Tanya to the point where the Alter Rebbe actually thought or intended to put that section of Tanya as the first section. And he changed it that the 53 chapters he put first, but in fact, that the second section is such a foundational part to the belief and foundations of life that he actually intended on putting that first, which is quite interesting. Okay, so since we're going to be wrapping up Tanya today, I thought it would be good to kind of give a summary, not on the entire Tanya, because that would take us a couple of years to summarize, but just on the last few chapters that we have been learning. I'll start with a story from a woman that actually she just passed away. She is a matriarch of a very large Chabad family. Her name was Mrs. Esther Mintz, and she has a son who's a Chabad rabbi in Bel Air in Southern California that I know quite well, and I got to spend time with him. But his mother had a very close relationship with the Rebbe, and she was in charge of a an umbrella organization of Chabad called Neshei Chabad, the women of Chabad, and they would put together programs for Chabad women. It started in Crown Heights in Brooklyn, but then there's chapters across the North America and then beyond. My mother was actually very involved in Neshei Chabad in Vancouver when she lived in Vancouver. But Esther Mentz was in charge of the Neshei Chabad in New York. And she describes an audience, a meeting she had with the Rebbe, where she basically told the Rebbe, I'm tired. I'm sick and tired of running the organization. I have too many other responsibilities. I have young children at home. On Sunday, when they're off of school, I'm busy working and arranging programs for people. I'm done. I'm calling it quits. And the Rebbe tells her, what do you want the Rebbe to say? And the Rebbe says the Rebbe is also tired. The Rebbe also doesn't have anyone helping him. The Rebbe is also doing everything himself. But yet the Rebbe keeps on going. The Rebbe keeps on doing. So she says, but I'm not a Rebbe. Meaning, yeah, the Rebbe could keep on going, but I'm not a Rebbe. I don't have to. And the Rebbe says, could you give it one more year? And she says, how could I say no to the Rebbe? So she gave it one more year, and I think you watch the video. You can watch a video. Maybe I'll put a link to it after the class. I'll send a summary email, God willing. And if I'm not mistaken, she actually kept it going for many years after that. Um, the reason why I share that is in Judaism, we have a paradox. On one hand, we all do the same things, but at the same time, we don't. What I mean by that is we all eat the same matzah on Pesach. We may get it from Israel or Ukraine or Montreal, but the mitzvah of the matzah we all do. Or the mitzvah of tefillin for men or the Shabbos candles for women, we all equally fulfill those mitzvahs. But then there's the emotional part of it that is different for each person, meaning each person has a different method of connecting with God through their emotions. And in fact, there's as many different connections with God built on our emotions as there are Jewish people in the world, which means every single one of us have a different method or a different approach in our connection. So meaning no two Jews are the same. And if I were to describe two main sections of the 53 chapters, or let me start with this. If I were to describe what Tanya is to another person, it's it's a program on how to discipline ourselves or how to be disciplined of how to behave, how to be a better person, and how to be the best person you can be. It's a regimen for everyone, meaning we all could study the chapters of Tanya and learn how to practice impulse control, how to be the best person, how to behave perfectly, meaning how to be a Bainani. That's equal to everyone. But I would say that really applies in the first 36 chapters. The first 36 chapters is a discipline on how to do the right thing, how to speak the right thing, how to think the right thing at every single moment of your life. But from chapter 37 till the end, from chapter 37 through chapter 53, it's really talking about the different levels of connection based on your soul level, based on who you are and your emotional capacity. That's how you could connect with God. And each Jew reaches based on where their soul is at, or based on the level or the quality of their soul. Simply, that would mean that even though we could each eat the matzah, but the intention or the mindfulness or what we've learned in the Hebrew, the kavanah, thank you, Shira, the what's going on inside of us when we do the mitzvah, that is different by every person. Some people have maybe more kavanah, some people have less kavanah, some people have no kavanah, and that would be like a body without a soul, like the wording we used in Tanya. But then there's a much deeper level of the mindfulness or kavana that we got into. And that's not just the intention of how you're doing the mitzvah, what's going on in your mind when you're doing it, but the deeper feeling that's going on inside of you and the emotion that's happening throughout your day. Meaning, when you're doing a mitzvah and at every single moment, what is the emotional level that you are holding, and how could you build on that emotions? Meaning, not only at the kavana at the moment, but like almost like the example that the Alter Rebbe himself gave, like a bird could survive without wings, but it's not reaching its maximum capacity. Similar to that, the a Jew who's living life based on their actions that they are doing, which is what the Beinoni is doing. Their action is being disciplined. But if they're not getting their emotions on board to where it should be, they're not living life to their fullest capacity. It's they need to improve what's going on in their hearts. And to do that, it has to start with the mind. From the mind, it will then go into the heart. And that's why God made human beings that they're upright, that the brain is always going to be above their heart. Unlike an animal that it's on the same level, by a human, it's going to be mind over the heart, because what that means is not only that you could practice impulse control, that your mind could control your heart, but over here, the second part of Tanya is teaching you how your mind can dictate or improve the feelings of your heart. So if you meditate on something in your mind, that will lead you to feel that in your heart. And from there, from chapter 41, the Alter Rebbe went into around 10 chapters of explaining different levels of meditations. We explained, and I'm going to explain these briefly. And I think, Naomi, you were asking a couple months ago to summarize them. So I'm doing that over here. I'm doing that now, where you could experience different feelings in your heart based on what you're thinking about in your mind. It's called meditation. So in chapter 41 through 44, we described a list of different meditations to build on the emotion of love, and a list of emotions of meditations to build on the emotion of fear. We started with fear because that's the foundation. It has to start with an awe and respect. And whether you're feeling that, thinking of that, having that mindset, that meditation, that will lead you to a feeling of love or a feeling of fear, which will lead to a closeness, which was what love leads to, or a distance, which is what fear leads to. So we explained different levels of fear, meditations of based on fear, and that is one could come from punishment, which means knowing the punishment that could come if I don't do it, it motivates you into doing the right thing. It's definitely a primitive or an immature level of fear, but it works. So that's the base or the lowest is this level. Similar to most of us don't talk on our cell phone while we're driving because we're scared of getting a ticket. It's not something to be ashamed of, but it's pretty immature. We should not talk on the cell phone because it's not safe. But or if it's a seatbelt, I'm just driving to the across the street. No cop is in the way. I could do it, but it's not about the punishment. But a lower level of fear is about the punishment that could come as a result. In the olden days, this one was a lot more focused on, which means preachers would travel to different townlets or shtatalach and tell them that if you don't do the right thing in God's eyes, you're going to be zapped, you're going to be punished. And it would motivate them to do the right thing. So it's a type of fear, but it's obviously it motivates you to do the right thing, but it's a very low level of fear. A higher level is what the Tanya quotes from a great teaching of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, one of the great leaders of the Jewish people, who was the leader during the time of the destruction of the Second Temple. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, let's make sure the speaker is coming from the right place. By the way, just take a pause here. How is the sound? Are you able to hear me well?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, I'm just curious. Is that any better of a sound, or does it still sound the same? Or did it sound better?
Did you just change something?
Yeah. Or it sounds the same?
No, it sounds worse.
Oh, good to know. Thank you.
So we can hear you just fine.
No, but whatever you just did made it not as good. That's all.
Okay, is that better?
That's good. Whatever you're doing now.
Okay. Cool. Okay, good to know. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, at the end of his life, his students asked him for parting words. Give us a teaching to leave us with. And they said, may be God's will that you should fear God as much as you fear people. And they said, that's it. That's what you're going to leave us with. That's the lesson. And on his deathbed, he said, halavai, which means like, if only you should be able to live up to that. And what that means, it's a higher level of fear of God, not based on the punishment, but based on the integrity that you have. It's honoring the relationship. It's higher than the first level, but it's still centered around you. In this, you don't want to ruin your reputation, and therefore you're scared of what people think. Not because you're scared they're going to punish you, but because you expect better of yourself and you want other people to look at you better. So you don't want to be on God's side, not on God's bad side, not because of punishment. And that's not your fear that motivates you. It's more, God expects so much more of you. You honor the relationship by not doing the wrong thing. And that motivates you, that fear that motivates you. But even this level, it's, talking about our reputation or something, it's higher than the first level, but it's still centered around you. What that means is it's still how you want to appear or how you want your relationship to work. And it's still centered, it's more of a selfish style of fear because it's more about you than it is about God. But then there's a higher level, I would say the third level of fear, of meditation that leads to this fear, is thinking of God as a king. This is one that is what we would call more as awe. You feel like you're in the presence of greatness. Nowadays, with government and with kings, we don't really have that. They definitely, a few weeks ago when they knighted the king, no, they don't knight the king, they crown the king, right? When they crowned the king, the coronation ceremony, it looked beautiful. And the crown, everything, they made the pomp and everything look so grand. But when you're in the presence of that king, it's not the same feeling. He's just a guy that has it, but he doesn't have that same authority as the kings in the olden days when you felt like you were in the presence of greatness. And therefore you could lose yourself by just being in that presence. And that's a much higher level of fear, not really centered around you. It's more centered around the king. It's, oh my gosh, I am in the presence of greatness. And that's a much higher, you could lose yourself in that. That's more in a positive way, meaning it's not even about you anymore. You just want to be you want to be totally consumed in that presence. You're in such awe of being in that presence. But even this level, this third level, this meditation of the awe that comes by meditating on God as a king, even that one, you realize a king needs not what's a better word than subjects. A king needs people to be a king over. So as much as the king is in himself greatness, he still has people that he needs to be a king over. So that's not the ultimate level. The highest level of fear, the meditation that brings you to fear, is knowing that God is the truth of all existence. When a person is in front of a king, not necessarily do you feel in front of the king that this is the truth. You may have fear of the king. You may know that the king is awe. You may have awe and reverence of the king. But when you're in front of a tzaddik, it's a different experience totally than when you're in front of a king. In front of a king, you have that awe and feeling, oh my gosh, the king has such power. But when you're not that he could punish me, but power that the king has so much internally inside of him. But when you're in front of a tzaddik, the feeling is not, oh my gosh, the tzaddik has so much power. It's so much more that the tzaddik sees the truth. The tzaddik has the truth. That's the presence you feel. So many times people talk about, their experience of being by the Rebbe. When you were in front of the Rebbe didn't make himself look great to you. What you saw in the Rebbe is you saw truth. You saw the real deal. You saw the epitome of truth, emes. And a meditation, the highest level of meditation would be the feeling or the meditation that God is the ultimate truth. And therefore I want that. I want to be I want to pursue that truth, and I want to seek, I want to be secured in that truth. And therefore that trying to have that is a fear of knowing, like this reverence or respect, knowing that God is that ultimate truth.
I think that the problem in society today
Yeah.
is that we treat Hashem with happenstance.
Yeah, like more
Instead-
casual and
Yeah, instead of thinking that everything comes from him alone.
right.
We think that it's our luck or our hard
Yeah,
work,
yeah.
and it's all directed by him.
Right. That's beautiful and important. So similar to these 4 levels of fear, the Alter Rebbe in these 3 chapters, 41 through 44, actually 4 chapters, it talks also about 4 levels of love. You can love Hashem because he is your provider. So he gives you everything you need, so you love him. But Hashem provides, so you love. Obviously, it's a very immature level of love. Similar to the love, why do you love your parents? Not just because they gave you toys as a kid and they gave you yummy dinners. That too, but that's not going to be the ultimate love. So Hashem could be a provider, but a higher level of love is much higher. It's going to be, you don't love him because of what he gives you in life. It's because he provides you life. He gives you life more than just, if you love your life, you will love the source of your life. And the source of your life is Hashem. So it's not loving God because he provides for you for what you have. It's more, you love your life and the source of your life is God. So therefore you go to the source. You love God.
Also less the animal spirit.
It lessens, say again,
Less of the animal
less of
spirit.
that, exactly.
Because I think about our dogs love us because we're the source of their food.
Exactly.
And
right.
it's not going any higher than that.
Right.
And so if you just love something because it's providing for you, then
Yeah.
it's very low
It's
level.
an interesting, very good. And it's an interesting thing. A lot of times if we bring our kids to the doctor, and they're little babies and they have to get shots at certain times. Now, they look to you as their protector, and here you are holding them down for them to get the shot or whatever it is that they have to be going through, and they're looking at you like, what are you talking about? Like, how could you be doing this and being part of the other team? And it's only when they're a little older, they mature and they realize there's obviously a lot more going on there, and they're actually helping you. Maybe that's a little off topic now. Over here, it's the idea that you're obsessed with your life. So reflect that God is the core or the source of everything in your life, so you'll come to love God. Higher than that, the 3rd level of this meditation would be that leads to love is reflecting on your relationship with God like a parent and a child. That God is your father, and it's so deep. It's not just because they provide. It's not because they are the source of your life. And the reason why we know it's even more than that is because a person would be ready to give up their life for the sake of their parents. So they love their parents, they love their father even more than their life. So this is loving God even more beyond the source of your life. But then there's the highest level is similar to in the fear is about pursuing the truth. Over here, you will suspend yourself to find truth, or you love Hashem because God is the core of the truth. So that would either lead you to a place of fear, which was the first chapters, or it could lead you to a feeling of love. Then, if I'm not mistaken, chapter 45, I think it was 44 or 45, the Alter Rebbe continued a different meditation, not one that leads to a love or fear. It was one, or at least it's built on compassion or pity. You have pity on your soul, on the descent that your soul had to make to come into this world, and how distanced it has been, it leads you to a place of empathy for your soul, wanting to help out your soul. But now, the last chapters of the 40s, the Alter Rebbe continued going back into the importance of love. To speak of what that means, there is a in the late 80s by the Rebbe and the early 90s, there was a development fund of Chabad where there were philanthropists that would come and they would be able to have and secure a meeting with the Rebbe. And one of these people that met the Rebbe, he had a siddur, a prayer book with him, and he said that he's going through the siddur and he wants to apply the phrases of the prayer book that talk about our fear of God, and how do we apply that in our life? How do we take the words of the siddur and actually practice that fear? And the Rebbe answers that there's many books that speak about how to practice, how to bring that fear into our life, but our main focus now, I don't know if the Rebbe says my main focus or the main focus now has to be in about applying the love into our life. If you apply the love into our life, ultimately the fear will follow also. Meaning you start with the love and it will lead one to have that reverence and fear as well, which seems to be a little bit different than the way it is in Tanya, that the order was actually first the fear and then to the love, and the fear has to be the foundation. But it seems like the Alter Rebbe the Rebbe quoted from the Shema that says, "V'ahavta et Hashem elakacha," you shall love God, and then it follows with all the other mitzvot that come as a result. So that today's generation, the Rebbe said, is more to be focused on the love, and the fear will come. So with that, the Alter Rebbe continues with chapter 46, 47, with a beautiful mashal, the beautiful parable of the idea was kamayim hapanim el hapanim, which means just like water will reflect a face with a face, meaning whatever is above the water, whatever face is above the water, that's what the water will reflect back. So too is the heart of man to another heart, meaning how are we reflected to another person? If you show up with love, if you are loving to another person, the other person, we gave many examples, if you go back to chapter 46, will melt away, even if they, had a hard day, but if you show this love, they will respond with love. It's just the natural way, the default, the way that God made us a person, is you have that smile, and it will reciprocate with the love, with a smile. So if we reflect on how God as a king, or let's just start with the parable. The parable was a king who leaves his palace and goes and finds a person who's in the woods with nothing, and totally like a homeless person by a garbage heap, and he embraces him. He brings him to his palace and he clothes him and he treats him with such respect. The person will have this enormous type of love reciprocated to the king. It's just a natural order. The way it will work is that love will be reciprocated in kind. So if we meditate on all the loving things that God has done for us, it will reciprocate love. And the two main things that the Alter Rebbe said for us to focus on, to reflect on, was how God took us out of Egypt. It took us from a place that we were slaves and totally in shambles, and God lifted us up to be at the height of the world. Now you may think, that wasn't me. That was many, many years ago. That wasn't even me. So the Alter Rebbe continued, chapter 47, you should know that every day we are experiencing this type of slavery and this exodus of Egypt, which means don't only think of it as something that happened many, many years ago, realize that it's something that's happening currently, present, and therefore right now God is helping you leave your own struggles and exiles, and that should bring you to a place of love for God. That's the natural reciprocal response. And the second one was the idea of tzimtzum, which is how God diminished his light, or we use the term in chapter 48 and 49, how God squeezed himself in order to be able to have a relationship with you. Meaning God was infinite and beyond what we could grasp. And God squeezed himself in order to be in a relationship that we should be able to appreciate God. So if we, just like we know how we have to sometimes squeeze ourselves to be in a relationship for another, The same is also true if we meditate on this idea that God squeezed himself. It will make us want to squeeze ourselves back, which means do things that may be uncomfortable in order for the sake and to honor that relationship. Then, okay, so that was, if I'm not mistaken, up till chapter 50. And then I'm not going to spend so much time on the last few chapters because it's more fresh in our minds. But in chapter 51, we then explain that the relationship between God and us is similar to the soul's relationship to the body, which means there's three parts of the soul's relationship to the body. One is the essence of the soul that is beyond enclothement in the body. Then we have the other part, or the farthest part of that, is the way the soul is totally enclosed in every limb of the body, tailor-made for that place. But then you had that middle, which is the nuclear energy, that the soul begins its enclosement into the body, not everywhere, but it starts with the energy center, the nerve center, which we said is the brain. So the soul initially comes into the brain, and from there it expands and has the commandments to go to the rest of the body. Similar to that, we have godliness that is beyond. It's infinite, which means infinite and finite can't merge. So there's the part of godliness that is beyond worlds, beyond. It's the light of God that is infinite. Then you have the other extreme would be the way godly energy is totally vested into every single creation and creature and part of the world and clothed fully. But then you have that middle, which is what we refer to in Hebrew as God's Shekhinah, God's divine presence, that is in each world. And there's four spiritual worlds. There's Atzilus, Bria, Yetzira, and Asiya. We're on the lowest world, which is Asiya. But all the way from the highest world, which is Atzilus, you have that level of Shekhinah. And the Shekhinah of each world is almost like the brain, the headquarters of that world. And in each world, the souls are able to tap into the Shekhinah part of that world. And one other part, just to make this, to clarify, let me just explain one more thing first. And in every world, you have that level of Shekhinah that is almost the bridge between what's infinite and what's finite. It's like that headquarters of the brain that's allowing the soul to be merged into the body. Geographically speaking, in our world, that was in the place of the temple, where when the temple stood, that was on the Temple Mount. There was the inner holy chamber, which was called the Kodesh HaKodashim. That was where the nerve center of our world was. So let me just explain to you the process. From the world of Atzilus, we had Shekhinah, which is the lowest level of Atzilus that allows the communication from Atzilus to lower. That brought upon the next world, which is Bria. And then you have the Chachma of Bria, which is the highest part of Bria, which is the Torah, the wisdom of Bria. But now that's being able to be communicated through the Shekhinah of Bria. And then it continues to the Shekhinah of Yetzira until it comes into the Shekhinah of our world. In our world, where is that Shekhinah? That Shekhinah was able to be manifested in the Kodesh HaKodashim, the Holy of Holies, and it's able to be accessed through Torah. Now that the temples have been destroyed, and we don't have that physical place of the Kodesh HaKodashim, the Holy of Holies, where is that going to now be accessed? It's not accessed anymore through the geographical space. It's actually accessed through the Torah itself. So the Torah becomes that connector when we study Torah, which is the wisdom of God, and when we do a mitzvah, which is performing the will of God, we are actually accessing that level of Shekhinah in our lives. We're able to tap into God's infinite energy that is able to be communicated through worlds through the Shekhinah. How is that communicated through the Shekhinah? That is in Torah itself. So in our Torah, that is the access point for God's Shekhinah to come into our life. That's how we become totally merged and united or married and in harmony with God. And that's really where Judaism, the whole concept of Judaism and the Torah and mitzvot we do, is that merging of God to the soul, of God to the person. And here's the kicker. At the end, the last few lines, which is what we're going to study today, after going through this very, very lofty Kabbalistic idea of Shekhinah and each world, where the Shekhinah is, what level of Sephira it is, at the end, the last few lines, we go back to the hero of the Tanya, which is the struggler, which is the Beinoni. And we end off with this beautiful idea of the struggle of the Beinoni, and the whole purpose of worlds was for that struggle, was for that Beinoni to be going through his struggle, and that is the essence of Judaism, for the Beinoni going through that struggle and connecting with God through his Torah and mitzvot is the purpose of it all. The way we, if you remember, we last week and 2 weeks ago, we revisited a Zohar, a story from the Zohar. It was from the deeper a section of the Zohar, about the Yenuka. The Yenuka was a young child who was a prodigy from a young age, and he was teaching these incredible teachings of Torah to the point where Talmudic sages came to listen to him, and they said, "We've never heard something like this before. This is otherworldly." And one of the teachings that the Yenuka gave was that we have for a flame to light, you need the wick, you need the oil, and you need the flame. And the flame in our lives is what's above the soul. The way we explained it is, the wick is the body of the person. The flame is the Shekhinah that is above the person that we are kindling, and the oil is the fuel, which is our Torah and mitzvot. So through the performance of our Torah and mitzvot, it's allowing the body to have that connection to the Shekhinah, which is the flame above us. I hope that story is remembered. But the beauty is, over here, there's one incredible ending to the Tanya, that is, it's not enough for there to be the oil, the wick, and the flame. In order for the flame to be lit, the oil needs to be consumed. The oil needs to be burning. That's the only way for the flame to work. So it's not enough to have the oil, which is the Torah and mitzvot, that's the fuel. The ending of Tanya, that we're going to read it today inside, is that it's the consumption of the oil that makes it all work. It's the consuming. What does that mean for the Beinoni? It's that struggle. The Beinoni struggle is that sacrifice, or is that burning that they're feeling. That is what's allowing the Shekhinah to be kindled. The Shekhinah above our heads, which is that flame that the Yenuka refer to, is happening through the oil and the wick, which is the Torah mitzvot, the fuel for the body. But only how is it actually working? It's through the consumption, which is the service that the person not only does as a tzaddik, which may be easier because they're gifted, but it's the struggle and the burning feeling that they have in the sacrifice that they are going through. So let's see that now inside, unless we have any questions before we read it inside. Otherwise, we're going to pull it up. 1 second, everyone. Where is that Kindle? Okay, 1 second, guys. Here it is. So does that sound right? 674 in the middle?
Yes.
Okay, so 674 in the middle, and hopefully we'll have enough time to finish it. Power, perfect. So actually the bottom of 674, I did not share it yet, so let's just access it. Here we go. Willpower, we're right in the middle of the Kindle page. Willpower is higher than wisdom. You can will yourself to do anything, regardless of whether it makes sense or not. And the same is true, figuratively speaking, of God's will and wisdom. The divine will, which is Keser, the crown, is higher than Chachma. Nevertheless, as the Tanya will now explain, Jewish law represents an expression of the divine will Kesser through the lens of Chachma. In the Torah, this divine will, which is Kesser, the crown, is enmeshed in divine Chachma, which is wisdom. And both Kesser and Chachma are merged with the blessed infinite light in a perfect unity. But what of the oral law? Does this also share the spiritual intensity of Kesser and Chachma? The Tanya cites proof that it does. And God, through Chachma, founded the earth referring to the oral law. Which, like the written law, emerged from the upper Chachmas, the Zohar states the father, Chachma, father, the daughter, the oral law. So I'm going a little bit quickly because really we discussed these ideas last week. As manifest here in this world, the oral law is lower than the written law. It is the daughter, not the father, the earth, and not the heavens. But in their root, both written and oral laws are manifestations of Chachma energy, which, as we have just learned, is merged with the blessed infinite light in a perfect unity. So why the Shekhinah needs oil? So now we're going to go back to the Beinani. So this is a beautiful ending to the Tanya, and let's see it now inside. Having spent the last 3 chapters discussing the concept of Shekhinah, the Tanya now returns to the issue that concerned us at the opening of chapter 51. There we had sought further clarification of the teaching attributed to the Yunuka, or to a child in the Zohar. And so now we're just going to revisit the quote from the Zohar, and it goes like this. A person should not walk 4 cubits with his head uncovered. What's the reason? Because the Shekhinah, which is divine presence, rests on his head, and the eyes and words of every wise man are on his head, meaning to say his attention is focused on that which rests and remains on his head, upon the Shekhinah. And when his eyes are there, he will be aware that the flame lit above his head, which is the Shekhinah, is in need of oil, since a person's body is a wick with a flame lit above it. King Shlomo shouts out to us, don't allow oil to be lacking from your head, because the flame on his head needs oil, referring to good deeds. Now that we have clarified the term Shekhinah at length, we can return to the Zohar's words. And all this discussion will help us clarify the statement of the child, or the Yunuka, in the Zohar, that the spiritual flame lit above his head, which is the Shekhinah, is in need of oil, meaning that this flame of the Shekhinah needs to be enmeshed with Chachma, since Chachma, as the Zohar states, is called holy anointing oil. And the Yunuka interprets the oil as these good deeds, Uvdin Tavin, which are the 613 mitzvot which flow from God's Chachma into this world, so as to keep the flame of the Shekhinah attached to the wick. And the wick refers to the energizing animal soul in the body. So we have the wick, which is the body, which is called the wick figuratively speaking, for just as with a physical candle, light shines as a result of the destruction and burning of fuel in the wick, which is transformed into fire, so too the light of the Shekhinah rests on the divine soul through the destruction of negative urges of the animal soul and its transformation to a force for the good. This transformation might be a complete one from darkness to light, from bitter to sweet, as is the case with tzaddikim, or at least in the case of beinonim, through the destruction of the animal soul's garments of thought, speech, and action, and their transformation from the darkness of klippas to the light of God, the blessed and infinite one, that's found in and united with the 613 mitzvot of the Torah. The destruction of the animal soul is necessary because through transforming the animal soul, which is derived from klipas noiga, from darkness to light, the elevation of feminine waters is achieved, which means human potential is awakened, which is a reciprocal gesture from above, and that causes the light of the Shekhinah, which is a disclosure of the blessed infinite light, to be pulled on your godly soul, which rests primarily in the brain of your head. So I'm going a little bit quickly. A lot of these ideas, even though it seems lofty, it's really going back and matching it up to the past few chapters. But the idea in short is that the Shekhinah, which is God's divine will and wisdom coming into this world, is able to be accessed not only by the tzaddik, but even by the Beinani, through their struggle or through the destruction of their animal soul and bringing godliness into their life. And this will clarify well the verse. This is a famous verse that says, for God, your God, is a consuming fire, as is explained elsewhere, that just as fire can only burn when there is fuel, so too the light of God will only shine in you when it is fueled by Torah observance and the destruction of your animal soul. With God's help, may he be blessed and exalted. This concludes the first part of the Tanya, the book of the in-betweeners or the struggler, the book of the Beinanim. So Mazel Tov, having finished this last beautiful idea, even after 3 chapters of it going into this lofty idea of what the Shekhinah is and everything, at the last few lines, the Alter Rebbe comes back to discussing the hero of the Tanya, which is the Beinani, and the idea that their struggle, don't think it's for naught, don't think it's wasted, don't think it's for nothing. Their struggle is actually the consumption, that when it says that God is a consuming fire, what is that fire, what is that consuming, allowing God to be that fire, is actually that struggle that we go through, and that when we push aside, or we that klipas noga, or the urges of the animal soul, it's allowing the Shekhinah to shine in your body, just like the fuel is being kindled by the consuming of that oil. All right, Mazel Tov, Mazel Tov. We finished it. Yasher Koach. So just a reminder, next week we'll probably not learn. I'll give everyone a chance to order the second book, which is I'll put a link, God willing, in an email that I'm going to send out, and probably the week after.
You're frozen. Say it again. You were frozen.
No problem. Am I still frozen?
You're not frozen. You started with saying just a reminder next week, and that was the last thing that we heard.
Oh, perfect. Okay, cool. So okay, let me just see what the internet is on. Okay, perfect. So yeah, next week we probably won't learn. I'll give everyone a chance to get their books. It's also Erev Shavuot. Everyone's welcome to join us next Friday. We're going to have Shavuot starts Thursday evening. Friday, God willing, we're going to have services in the morning, but also a dairy dinner will be at 6 p.m. Where we'll listen to the 10 Commandments, and we'll celebrate with a dinner and an ice cream party. That will be right here at 6 p.m. on Friday. And then the following week, God willing, we'll start the second section of Tanya, called not the book of the in-betweeners, which was the first one, but is known as Shar HaYichud Ve'emunah, which is the book of, I don't know how Rabbi Miller translates it, but it's like, it would be, literally it would mean the book of unity and faith or belief in God. So we'll see what how he titles that in on Amazon. But God willing, we'll start that in 2 weeks. All right, everyone. Yasher Koach. Any questions before we end?
Yes, yeah. Yes. Right.